Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk about Encanto. Encanto is one of the biggest new Disney movies out there right now. Lots of colors, culture, and catchy tunes. But is it really a kids movie? Before we really get into it, I wanted to summarize the movie for those of you who haven't seen it. If your mom wasn't seen it yet, I applaud you. The songs are catchy as fuck, and once you listen to them, you can't unhear them. Encanto is about a magical family living in a magical house in Colombia. Long ago, Alma Madrigal, the matriarch of the family and Abuela to the main character Mirabelle, is saved from armed conflict with her triplet children by a magical gift imbued in a candle. Sadly, her husband Pedro is killed. The gift creates for them a haven in the form of a sentient casita. All three of Alma's children, and each new member of the family, receives a unique gift of their own as children, and they use those gifts to grow the area around the casita into a wonderful and prosperous community. Unfortunately, our main character Mirabelle is the only person to never receive a gift. But what happens when the magic is threatened? Quick, if you haven't seen the movie yet, stop listening. Major spoilers up ahead. Now, please don't get me wrong. I love Encanto just as much as the next guy, but for reasons that have nothing to do with the Colombian culture, the colorful colors, the catchy tunes. I love it because I'm an adult survivor of complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and the movie takes a nosedive into some very close-to-home family issues I have just started working through. Concepts that no child, especially not a small child, can understand. Well, let me explain. First, let's get into the characters. So the matriarch, Alma Madrigal, she is also known as Abuela. It's very clear from the beginning that she's the boss. The point's driven home in our main character Mirabelle's very first song when she sings, "Let's be clear, Abuela runs the show." She's always there watching the other family members, but she doesn't really seem to notice Mirabelle at all. Mirabelle seems like more of an inconvenience to her than her own grandchild. During Mirabelle's first song about her family and everyone's unique gifts, Abuela sings, "And each new generation must keep the candle burning," or must keep the magic burning, or whatever she says. Must. It's clear that Abuela cares only about the gifts and what her family can do for her and for the community. Since Mirabelle doesn't have a gift, she can't contribute anything, and therefore has little to no value at all. Honestly, Abuela seems like a classic narcissist who only cares about herself and how her family makes her look. Mirabelle's lack of gift makes Abuela look bad, so she pretends she isn't there. Next we have Julieta, one of Abuela's daughters. Julieta is also Mirabelle's mom, and her unique gift is the ability to make food that heals injuries and cures illnesses. At the beginning of the movie, Julieta's husband has some bee stings on his face that Julieta magically makes disappear with a piece of bread. You can tell from the very beginning that Julieta is nurturing toward her daughter and loves her very much, but she doesn't seem to get involved when Abuela makes condescending comments toward her. It seems that Julieta doesn't want to or know how to stand up to her mother, even if it's in defense of her own child. It's hard for me to understand Julieta as a mom myself because I'm a total mama bear when it comes to Lily and Holly. Even with mommy issues of my own and my inability to defend myself, I will call my mom out if she says anything to the girls that is less than supportive. Mirabelle's dad seems like a loving father, but I guess since he's only related to the family by marriage, he doesn't really play much of a role in the family affairs. When Mirabelle starts creating some waves with the family, her dad tells her to pretend everything's fine, no one needs to know. Next we have Julieta's brother Bruno, who doesn't come into play until halfway through the movie. We learn that Bruno could see the future, and one day he disappeared. We also learn pretty quickly that no one seems to like Bruno that much. During Mirabelle's song about her family in the beginning of the movie, the whole neighborhood sings, "We don't talk about Bruno," when Mirabelle mentions his name, making her move on to the next person rather quickly. In fact, there's an entire song devoted to this shunning of Bruno titled, "We Don't Talk About Bruno," which is sung by none other than his sister Pepa. I have a lot of issues with Pepa. Pepa's special ability is controlling the weather with her emotions. When she's happy, the sky is clear and the sun is out. When she's upset, there's rain and storms. During her song about Bruno, Pepa shares that Bruno ruined her wedding day by telling her it looked like it was going to rain. Upon hearing this, Pepa's emotions got the best of her and she ended up getting married in a hurricane. Others chime in during the song too, and we learn that Bruno's visions caused a goldfish to die, a neighbor to lose his hair, and another one to grow a gut. Pepa's son Camilo also joins in and sings about Bruno having rats on his back and how when Bruno calls your name, that's it for you. Before we move on to the other characters, I'd like to deconstruct Pepa a bit further. All of the characters I've mentioned thus far, by the way, except for Mirabelle and Bruno, who disappeared, seem to be in Abuela's good graces. So Pepa's big complaint about her brother is that he made her upset right before her wedding because he mentioned it looked cloudy outside. She is so mad about that she sings an entire song about how we don't talk about Bruno. She gets the whole town to join in, and even her son has some negative comments to add. This to me is generational trauma at work. Bruno was written off by everyone, probably starting with Abuela, and then Pepa passed that down to her son. Hearing him sing about Bruno, I don't even think he ever met his uncle. Okay, moving on, I'll come back to that at the end. Mirabelle's sisters Isabella and Luisa also have gifts. The first sister, Luisa, is the strong one. She can lift and move anything her community needs her to, including whole churches. Her and Mirabelle seem to have a wonderful and loving relationship, and honestly, Luisa was the character that I related to the most when I first saw the movie. She sings a song called Surface Pressure about how she's expected to do all of these things, but on the inside she feels herself cracking up from all the pressure that's constantly weighing on her. Isabella is a beautiful one. She's able to grow beautiful flowers everywhere at the snap of her fingers. She seems to live the perfect, charmed existence, and everyone loves her. According to Mirabelle, she's never even had a bad hair day. Isabella is slated to get engaged to a man from the community, a man that it seems Abuela may like more than she does. Isabella and Mirabelle clash from the very beginning of the movie. It seems Mirabelle is always in Isabella's way, and Isabella looks down her nose at Mirabelle often. So now that we know all the major players, let's talk about the plot in more detail. At the beginning of the movie, the smallest cousin, Antonio, is getting ready for the ceremony where he will get his gift. He shares a nice moment with Mirabelle wherein she tells him that gift or no gift, she'll always love him. When it's time for the ceremony, Antonio pleads with Mirabelle to walk with him up to his bedroom door where he'll receive his gift. Clearly, Antonio and Mirabelle share a wonderful bond. Mirabelle is unsure but agrees to make Antonio feel comfortable. Abuela looks on in shock, and we see a flashback of when Mirabelle is walking down the hallway to receive her gift. Little Mirabelle nervously walks up to the door, touches the knob, and then, when nothing happens, looks around as if she had done something wrong. The look of disappointment on Abuela's face taught her shame at such a young age, and she carried that with her all this time. After Antonio's ceremony, he does receive a gift, by the way. Mirabelle starts noticing an issue with the casita's magic. She tries to warn the others, but when Abuela doesn't notice any issues immediately, she dismisses her. We see Abuela later after the party praying to her late husband about the magic, so it seems she did at least hear what Mirabelle was saying. I'm not too sure what to make of this, to be honest, but it's nice that she didn't just ignore her granddaughter completely. She just wasn't going to disrupt the party because of her. Mirabelle makes it her mission to save the magic, and this is where the story really ramps up. She sets out to first ask around and see if any of her family members have noticed anything strange. She gets nowhere until she talks to Luisa, the strong one, and Luisa sings her song Surface Pressure. She confides to Mirabelle that she felt her strength waning off and on, and she should seek out Bruno for more answers. Mirabelle asks about Bruno, and that is when we get blessed with the song We Don't Talk About Bruno. Mirabelle finds Bruno, and we find out that Bruno had a vision of the family magic dying, and that Mirabelle would be involved. We also find out that Bruno was so scared to tell his family about this because they were constantly dismissing him that he decided it was easier to just disappear. He never left the casita, however. He was just hiding in the walls of the house, watching his family from the shadows. My heart broke for Bruno. As catchy as the song We Don't Talk About Bruno is, it is a terrible message. Abuela's son disappears out of shame, and all anyone can think about is how much he sucks. No one was worried about him, and his own sister just decided to shun him forever with the rest of them. That was really hard for me to watch, because no matter how domineering Abuela was, you would think that bond between brother and sister would be stronger than that. I think that's my biggest problem with Pepa. She was his sister, and she not only sings We Don't Talk About Bruno, but she lets her son disparage him too. Not okay. Mirabelle and Bruno figure out that the key to saving the magic is Mirabelle and Isabella reconciling. This doesn't make sense to Mirabelle at first, and she tries to just hug it out with her sister, but a fight ensues instead. They fight until Isabella makes a pineapple grow in the middle of her room, which she had never done before. She sings What Else Can I Do? And sisters reunite with the realization that Isabella is finally free to be her own person and forge her own path. Mirabelle didn't realize how much pressure Isabella also felt to create beautiful things and to be perfect for her family every moment. So Mirabelle and Luisa finally do reconcile, which, although the magic does break for a little while, does in fact bring the family together and repair bonds. Bruno comes out of hiding and is welcomed back with open arms. That part was confusing to me too. Abuela and Pepa give Bruno a hug, and somehow that makes up for the past. Honestly, if I was Bruno, I would have told Pepa to F off. Bruno was hiding in the walls during Pepa's song about him, so he would have heard the whole thing. The betrayal is astounding, and what they need instead of a quick hug is years of therapy. That entire family needs therapy if they are ever actually going to solve any problems. So I'll say it again, this movie was great in terms of me watching as an adult. There's so much to unpack and relate to as an adult, but it isn't a kid's movie. I related immediately to Luisa because as a mom, I feel the weight of the world on my shoulders all the time, and there's all this pressure to take care of my family. I related to Bruno because I know what it's like to have a secret and feel like you can't tell anyone, like it would be easier to just disappear. And I related to Mirabelle because growing up, I often felt like I wasn't good enough. These are all things I didn't even begin to process or even realize I had to process until I reached adulthood and became a mom. These are not connections I would have made as a child. These are all concepts that no child should be able to relate to. Beyond that, I'm not even sure a child would be able to understand them. Honestly, if any child relates to any of these characters, there's something very wrong happening in their family. So why was the movie created for kids? Why was it advertised as a children's movie on Disney? Kids need to be able to relate to the characters in the shows they watch. It isn't enough to just have bright colors and catchy songs. I mean, obviously kids love it because of that, but the movie's not about them. Encanto is more geared toward the inner children locked inside of 30-somethings with mental health issues. Complex PTSD, for example. Adult survivors of childhood trauma will definitely be able to relate to all of those characters, as I did. The key word there is adult. I don't think that a child, even if they're currently experiencing trauma, would be able to take anything away from the movie other than, I love this song. By the way, I really hate we don't talk about Bruno, because we absolutely do talk about Bruno. Replace Bruno with any problems the child may be facing, like daddy's drinking or the teacher at school that likes to give back rubs. We just aren't going to talk about it. That's the wrong message to be sending. Kids won't understand, they'll just sing the song, but any adult who wants to take advantage of them can just say, hey, let's not talk about Bruno. And sure, everything gets resolved at the end of the movie and they realize that it was wrong to shun Bruno the way they did, but a child isn't going to remember that in the moment. They're just going to remember, we don't talk about Bruno, no. I feel like the movies that are coming out these days are forcing all of those adult lessons onto children, and it makes me really uncomfortable. We're no longer letting kids be kids, they suddenly have to be tiny adults who are taught all these complicated concepts about the world that they aren't mentally prepared to handle. I don't understand the sudden rush to make our kids grow up. Let them stay little for as long as they can. In case you haven't noticed, being an adult isn't very fun. I'm determined to let my kids develop naturally the way they were always meant to, without having adult concepts and situations forced on them. They don't need all that noise right now. They just need to be loved and taken care of. With the recent push to make children adults, I've become even more determined to preserve Lily and Holly's innocence and childhood for as long as I possibly can. Of course, bad things happen. They may experience things that make them grow up faster than they normally would, but I'm not going to do anything to rush that. I guess the TLDR version of this video is let kids be kids.